The recent Red Bull Wololo qualifier event was the first Age of Mythology tournament for Retold, with a total prize pool of $20,000 including the main event and the qualifiers together. A huge prize pool, considering most of AOM tournaments in recent years have either been crowdfunded by the community or the content creators. The Red Bull qualifiers had the most viewers and highest production value the competitive AOM scene has witnessed for years. The tournament did have a different set of rules than the old community tournaments from Legacy though, including a draft picking system for major gods. Draft picking is the standard for AoE 2 competitive and for MOBAs. It essentially takes away the overpowered picks and gives more variety for viewers to watch. The question is this a good idea for competitive AOM? The reason I wanted to talk about this is because it sparked some discussion on the Red Bull Wololo Discord channel. Players that main certain gods or civilizations were not only receiving bans against their main gods, but the opponent was picking them as well, effectively leaving them with one god from their favourite pantheon that they could only play once. For anyone who didn't see, here's how the draft system works for Age of Mythology. Let's use best of 3 as an example. The player with the highest elo chose if they wanted to be first pick or second pick. Player 1 banned a god, player 2 banned a god, player 1 then gets first pick. Player 2 then gets to pick 2 gods, player 1 picks 2 gods, player 2 picks 2 gods again, and then player 1 gets to pick a final god. Each of their gods can only be played once, win or lose. For any players who have played other games where draft picking is common, this is just second nature. I've played MOBAs for the last 10 years, where every ranked game starts with banning the most broken character, or just something you don't want to play against. But I can understand why some players might not quite understand the intricacies of selecting a god to take it away from your opponent, rather than because it's your best god. At the end of the day, drafting is a skill, and it's just something extra to think about. So why do we think the tournament organisers are adding this? First off, I think it's for the viewers. Almost every god will be on show. As a viewer, I want to have a variety in what I'm watching. I don't want to see the same matchup with the same strategies every time, and I'm sure this is the case for others watching as well. You can clearly see this from original Age of Mythology tournaments, when it was still played on the Titans 1.03 patch. The gods that were picked were always the same, so you often saw a Zeus versus Isis matchup multiple times. There is also something to seeing this, seeing the best players use the best gods for the highest level possible. Viewers also want to see the gods that they play. It's a healthy state for a tournament if you can get to see every single god or character in the game. Obviously this isn't always possible, but it's nice to see. But with this pick and ban method, you'll have much more chance of seeing something historically weak in competitive play, something like Gaia. All of the Gaia fans will be really hyped to see her get her moment to shine. There's also something for rooting for the underdog or the low tier pick. I've always loved getting to see seemingly bad characters in a game get wins against the meta picks, something you're less likely to see if you can just play the best gods over and over again. With this pick and ban system, there's no mirror matchups. I personally don't like seeing mirror matchups, or even playing them. There's normally one meta strategy that both players will just go for, and if one player makes a very small mistake, they'll just lose, because the game will snowball from there. For example, the Legacy matchup for Ra, you'd often see the same 2-town center fast farm strategy into a quick rain, and they wouldn't fight for 10 minutes. Some players would try to counter this with a Bast Sphinx play with Eclipse, but if you didn't get enough damage done, the player that just sat back and seemingly did nothing would get the win. I'd much rather see different matchups where gods have their own power spikes at different times and each player needs to play around that. But it's not just for the viewers. With this method, the best all-around players should normally win. A player like the Mister that made it through to the finals can play all the gods to a very high level, which is most likely why he did so well in the tournament. If the tournament let you pick whatever god you wanted and played that for the entire tournament, there's more of a chance of other players getting wins over someone that's a multi-god talent like the Mister. Being extremely talented at one pick is one thing, but it takes so much more game knowledge and skill to play everything to the highest level. Another reason they might be doing it is just because other games do it. As mentioned earlier, Age of Empires 2 is the most popular of the Age games, and they do that for their very high level tournaments. But what are some negatives or potential drawbacks from this pick-ban draft system? Age of Mythology civs are completely different from each other. As just mentioned, Age of Empires 2 does this, but most of the civs use the same economy and the same base units. They obviously have their strengths and weaknesses, but share a lot of the same aspects. Obviously a lot of these will have different playstyles, for example if they're cavalry civs and like to raid, or if they're eco-boomers. In Age of Mythology though, it's hard to begin to compare gods like Thor and Set. They have completely different economy, They use different units to build, they have completely different units and strategies to try and get them the win. The amount of time required to get to a competitive level with every god would be extremely difficult. Another bad aspect is banning someone's main god may take away from the highest level of competition. Even for someone like me, I have a best god, which is Isis. When I played the tournament, my opponent insta-banned Isis because they could just look up my win rate. My Isis is probably 100 elo higher than any other god that I can play, which would make the tournament technically lower skill if I also did the same for my opponent. There's an argument about this in other games too, like if you take the best MOBA character, they should learn to play something else. But normally there are other characters that play a similar role. But as mentioned earlier, Age of Mythology gods are very different, even if coming from the same civilization. If you're playing Frey as a budget Odin, it just doesn't feel good. You need to play completely different to reap the rewards of Frey. You need to sit back and play defensive, whereas Odin normally wants to go all out on raids. The question is, do we want Age of Mythology to be similar to Age of Empires with this pick ban system, or similar to a game like StarCraft 2 or a fighting game, where one player just mains one faction or one character to the highest level possible? I think this is always going to be up for debate, but I think if we are going with this pick ban method, I think there's ways to improve it. First off, I think you should pick the amount of gods that you need for the set. The best of 3 example from earlier, players ended up with 4 gods. I'm assuming this is done so you have slightly more choice of what you want to play in potential matchups. But this also does give the chance of a player taking a god away from their opponent, even if they have no intention to play it themselves. Almost like giving them an extra ban. If you can play all the gods and your opponent can't, you might as well pick something that they like, even if you don't want to play it yourself. A second way to improve might just be to remove the one ban. There are currently only 3 gods for most civs. Maybe if and when that number increases to 4, like the Norse, bans could feel a little bit better. But for now, it just feels rough to take away 66% of a pantheon if you get to the first pick slot, and you can ban and pick it. Let me know what your thoughts are on a pick ban draft system, and I'll see you in the next one.